session of hardwear.io. This panel is about how research influences product security. And we are going to be talking about the bittersweet relationship between the research community and the product security. Look at challenges, and the current state and what is it that can be done to fix it. So I have with me Nolan, Neer, Jason, and Tamara. I am Asim Jakar, co-founder of hardwear.io. Let's take 20 seconds for the introductions.
Yeah, my name is Nolan Johnson. I am currently the director of hardware security at Aon Cyber Solutions, a cyber solutions vendor that does hardware, product security, embedded firmware, kind of all the above, pen testing and app as well. I come from an independent security research background and have worked in product security office and product security engineering roles before. So,
okay, and I'm Neer. I'm from Winbond. Among many other things, we do secure flash devices. I've been with the company since its inception for the secure products. I'm the CTO, so I'm in charge of the technology architecture for our products. That's it.
And I'm Jason Meltzer. I'm a consulting security engineer with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. I'm Jason Meltzer. I'm a consulting security engineer on the hardware security team at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. My team is responsible for solving some of the really tricky security problems in building and designing hardware and for a cloud environment and figuring out how that works within the orchestration environments that we have to in order to do things like provision hardware. Prior to this more of a sort of building focused role, my previous decade was spent doing internal vulnerability research at places like BlackBerry and Intel on hardware and software, both.
I'm Tamara Schmitz. I'm the director of product security at Micron Technologies. We do our best to secure our products. If it's DRAM, then it's all hardware. If it's SSDs and MNAND or CXL, there's firmware and hardware, which gives you all of the fun of the interaction. We do penetration testing. We have a PSER team. We are involved in the product development. I felt like I was kind of shadowing what she said at the last roundtable. But as we're getting integrated, people are finding out that cybersecurity is absolutely vital, and we have to be involved in every step of the way.
All right. For your reference, the panel is divided into two parts. Nolan here will be representing the research community, and rest of the guests will be representing the product security side. So Nolan, I'm with you if things get intense. All right. So when vulnerabilities get reported or new papers come out, what are some of the internal challenges that you have to deal with that many people may not realize? We can start with you, Neil.
Okay, so since we make products that stay in market for years, tens of years maybe, so we have to be on top of everything. So every time there's a new research or some publication that even remotely applies to what we do, we immediately get a lot of traffic from customers asking about that, those who are savvy enough to understand that there are security issues. So it's always quite a bit of a headache to start to prepare to give a good answer and also to check that our existing products meet whatever was detected. I mean, if we can mitigate that. And then again, 90% of those, or even more than that, of those researchers actually help us to promote our products, okay, because they reveal the fact that there are actual issues out there that our customers should be aware of. So that's a driver and a motivation also for our business.
Jason?
I guess, so some of the different challenges that as a cloud service provider, we do build our own hardware, but oftentimes we're downstream of other vendors. We include their products. So one of the big challenges in that is that people often report vulnerabilities and whatnot to them. And fixing stuff in hardware takes a long time. We're then even further downstream from that. And often if sometimes that's compounding the hardware problem when it's a vendor hardware issue that then needs to go into a further piece of hardware on our side. And then there's the effect of trying to roll those things out and fix them at scale. That people often don't think about those things.
I can tag on to that to say that as a researcher, there's a lot of thought nowadays that goes into who you report the vulnerability to. I know we found fault injection on Amlogic boards. We could have gone to Amlogic with it, but going to a chipset vendor is tough, and there's a lot of barriers to that, especially given locations and where they are. It can be a little bit difficult to even get in touch. So we went to Google because we knew that Google had a product that used it that could drive that report to the place it needed to go. Right. But if we had decided to report that on the Walmart on box, right, I don't think we would have gotten the headway we got, and we wouldn't have gotten the remediation push that we got. So that can be really difficult from the researcher side as well.
And I guess one thing that I'll add to that is that even sometimes like figuring out how as a customer that is downstream from this, how we deal with this problem, it doesn't really do us much good if the vendor comes, 90 days later, a year and a half later, and says, "Oh, there's this embargoed vuln. We fixed our product," and then suddenly, and it's going to be in real world example that I won't throw this vendor under the bus, but learned 48 hours before a very significant piece of research dropped that there was from the vendor. They're like, "Hey, by the way, this piece of research is gonna drop in 48 hours," and we're like, what? So from that standpoint, it doesn't stop with the original manufacturer and the component maker. And so yeah, like you're saying, sometimes that's in a position where we really care about it because we're still going to have to wait a long time, potentially, for something to be fixed, and then we have to try and do it.
Yeah, and there's also some bit of and I say because I've seen this from experience, not to take a hot take or anything, but some less than cool companies will take it as an opportunity to get ahead of their competitors. They'll triage the report internally and not share it with their competitors who have the same bug. So they come to market and say, "We're fixed, it's all good," but our competitors aren't. And they're using security as marketing, which can be useful and definitely has its place. But in some places that kind of affects the wider community because everybody gets it, like you said, 48 hours before or 48 hours after they become aware of it, which is a real pain.
There we go. I think the whole, at least the whole industry, at least my industry, which is a commodity-based industry, which so the focus is on efficiency more than it is on, always driving innovation. Everybody wants to innovate. Yeah, it's a cool word, but honestly, the company's about efficiency. So for me, it's explaining the impact of the issue when I have the people to test what happens to the component. But we don't always have visibility on how customers are using it, what the applications are, what all the speeds and feeds are that could cause some kind of connection or could cause some kind of vulnerability. So that's improving because I'm a big girl and people start to listen when you get in their face. So I would say it's explaining to people what's going on because there's a big push for education, especially in the executive ranks, to understand what's needed. And then to understand that risk is not always going to be able to be calculated cleanly. You have to just say, "Hey, look, this is possible, and are we going to do something about it? As a physical attack, as a remote attack? How are we going to get to this?"
Okay. And one of the things I see a lot of difficulty in terms of fixing as well is hardware bugs plus the whole supply chain. Pretty complex. Do you think the research community understands the whole process, or what are the challenges that you see from your side?
Yeah, I'd say that's it's uneven. There's some things that we've encountered that people do seem to understand the broader picture of these things, especially the supply chain stuff. But there's even sometimes we deal with fairly major vendors that we're even dealing with practical issues, and they don't understand that, we're a huge company. We have a lot of hardware. We have very well-defined, in some cases, firmware intake processes, for instance. the question of like, how do you then maybe, if there's something that is really urgent, how do you interrupt that? Those are but just the context of running a cloud and whatnot that is, you don't really see outside. And so that's often missed. Probably that aspect.
What are your thoughts, Nolan?
Timelines, right? So 90 days of disclosure is kind of the typical. That's kind of the industry accepted. The dilemma becomes, and I understand it from the corporate point of view, but at the same time, logistics become important. We send the email, we start the 90-day clock in our head, and the problem becomes it might take a month to get where it needs to go. It might take another month to get from security to the relevant division to actually work on remediating it. And then we end up running into that 90-day period before, the researchers really had the ticket triaged or before anything's been really communicated to them. Because, you don't need to communicate about your internal business processes. That's not something that should be expected. But at the same time, some sort of finger to the pulse to understand where they're at. I've sat in a few disclosures on the hardware side where they say, we're going to need more than 90 days. Let's do 200, which is a large number. And they still missed that. Yeah.
Yeah, the 90-day thing, we're at a hardware conference, people. Hardware does not get fixed in 90 days. Software can get fixed. Google Project Zero came up with 90 days when they were talking about software. So now that we have hardware, we need a month or two to evaluate, to come up with the plan, and then we need minimum 6 months to execute. So I need about 8 months. We need someone to write that standard and push it out. Someone want to volunteer? Because until that becomes a standard and it becomes accepted, we're going to keep getting pushed into whatever was accepted for software and expected to perform, and we're going to fail every single time.
Actually, maybe there's a point there too. Even with the software patches, they don't always work. They sometimes fail. Subject of what some of the things that Sergey talked about this morning. With hardware, you have to, you're then locked into that issue of how long does it take to, like, that fix is then a piece of hardware, potentially. And you have to get it right. You can't just go back and realize, oh, we didn't get the patch quite right. Let's fix it. So there's that as well.
Neil, you have
I'm actually, hardware vulnerabilities, when they're detected, they are sometimes impossible to remedy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to go and replace millions of devices. Try to find some software workaround, and sometimes that's not even possible. So even 90 days, even 900 days might not be enough.
Actually, I want to throw one more thing in here so that we're not just in kind of radical agreement. Another side of things is the fact that, what was it, like, Benjamin Franklin, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. This is a problem of, like, once an issue is disclosed, how many people before that, like, it's not even a matter of like, when it becomes effectively public. It's when is that issue potentially exposed to an adversary, and often a very serious adversary when you're talking about some hardware things. I mean, that this is an aspect of espionage that's pretty key, finding out about serious vulnerabilities like this. And so, in that way, maybe this is the other side of it that maybe 90 days is too long in some cases.
Well, 90 days is too long to have that communication, but 90 days is not too long into fixing it. And I would say the other issue that is going to come up is that sometimes we find something in one of our parts that you guys have helped us find, but for us to fix it might take 8 months. But if someone made a change in Intel and AMD's processor, in their memory controller, we could mitigate it there. And I haven't seen the appetite for companies to share that information without saying, oh, we look bad, or, oh, what is that going to do to our business? And so we have to get over that hump and say, how do we take care of the customers together?
And to pivot back on the research side, mitigation, I totally understand hardware, especially if you're doing a full hardware revision. That's way more than 90 days. I do get that. But triaging and assigning a criticality and then potentially like VRP payouts and things like that, I think we can't let that slip to 300 days. If I'm net 1 year on my bug bounties, that's a little tough.
But doesn't bug bounty help? Like, you here's $5,000, here's the NDA, shut your mouth.
See, that's what I was saying.
The NDA part I like, yeah.
I'm in.
All right. Okay. How often do you find academic research directly influencing product security decisions, and what would make it more actionable?
Rowhammer someone?
Okay, thanks. So academic research can cause us a lot of trouble and has caused us to spend millions of dollars. Congratulations. We absolutely take a look at every paper we get a hold of and whatever country it comes from, embargoed or not. I love the ones I just got from North Korea, but those go into the products. But as you said, sometimes we can't go back and replace, thousands, hundreds of thousands of products that are already out there. So we can fix it in the next generation. It becomes part of the validation suite. We can figure out ways to address it. But no, it's undeniable that academics has a way to affect us. What I'd like to say about that is I wish there was a little more practicality in the way that academics presented the information. So, hey, I can expose this key. What does that mean? What can you do with it? What does that mean for the customer? How, take it the step further so I don't have to learn what your system is and what's going on, so we can speed up some of this 90-day stuff.
And I can say that, reported a secure boot bypass on the Chromecast, right? And that's super cool from an academic perspective. We got to, some of the highest privilege levels. But in the end, in order to get people to recognize kind of the importance of it, we had to step back down privilege level-wise to the OS and dump out the audio from the microphone on the remote. Until we did that, people didn't really understand and care, I don't think, honestly. And that's kind of where the tagline comes. So I can totally see that.
I'd also love it if academics would, I know red team is cool, but if you'd look a little bit at how to fix the things that you find, that could be fun.
That's our job.
And the other piece is if you come up with a fix, look at what happens to performance. Look at what happens to efficiency. Look at the kind of arguments I'm going to have. I know you don't care about me yet, but that I'm going to be having when I present this material to make it real, so that you're really affecting the world.
Actually, I'll one slightly different piece here is the fact is I guess I'm the man of quotations today. Apparently, I'll reference some Halvar Flake here in talking about that. Challenges. Some of the challenges presented by offensive security problems are generally technical in nature, but conversely, the challenges posed by defensive security problems and fixing things are often political or technosocial in nature. And this asymmetry sometimes makes fixes hard. Even some really complicated things on the offensive side, or even really simple things. Figuring out how to socialize how something is fixed, and then amongst a huge complex system, especially like a cloud or something like that, that's usually where more of the problems are. I don't know, in my past lives as a vulnerability researcher, even internally, maybe a lot of other vulnerability researchers have similar experience, but you find bugs, you end up caring about those bugs the most. You accumulate this pile of bugs that you have to be the one to push to fix, and mostly because that there are these people have different incentives, people have different goals. How something gets fixed is a matter of then coordination, and it's all the different kind of action problems that engenders.
I can concede that we should help more with remediation on the technical side, but on the political side, I'm sorry, that's not what we're made for.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah.
No, but understand if I don't get back to you every other day with updates, it's probably because I'm listening. I'm getting phone calls from Singapore in the middle of the night.
All right. So recommendations, yes. And what other areas of hardware security you wish that are more deeply researched by academia? We start with you, Neil.
Actually, I'd rather they stop doing any research. It's such headache. But no. Okay, so we are all moving to the post-quantum area. So I think more focus there on post-quantum. Everybody wants that. Nobody really understands why, or most don't understand why, but they all want that for free yesterday. And I think that here the research should be more practical. I mean, algorithms like all the lattice-based stuff, the MLDSA and stuff like that, it's so complicated, so tasking. And then, we have customers coming to us and said, oh, I read this article and they said that you have to have this, and we want that. That article didn't explain how complicated that's going to be. It's hidden in the details, and nobody reads page 13 of any research. I mean, they get to page 2 at most. So I think the research community should outline not only the outcome, but the costs incurred in that. Like, okay, that's going to be expensive. That's going to be hard to develop. That's going to be hard to implement if that's some vulnerability. Hey, we found that if you do this and that, you weaken the key by, let's say, a factor of 2. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, so I made the key, instead of taking 2 billion years, it's going to take 1 billion years. So is that a practical problem? Probably not. But customers, they scramble and say, oh, they found this and that problem. We want you to rectify this. And, well, that's not actually a problem. Not your problem. So.
Yeah, and I see a lot of research papers, academic research that have a lot of conditions as well. For example, there should be an eclipse when you are running the software. Godzilla should be sunbathing, and that's when it's going to happen.
February 29th, my favorite day.
So executive summaries on all of our white papers. That's going to be 16 extra effort hours on the SAO.
Well, you have to do that. Otherwise, it's like the crying wolf all the time. I mean, you get like, how many? 20,000 CVs every year, something like that. And if you read more than 10 out of 20,000? Nah, not really. So unless there is more profound information there that's gonna, capture the attention and have a much more thorough explanation of the nature of the problem and the nature of the fix, we are actually losing this battle.
The other issue with research, it's not to blame, it's just a fact, is that a lot of it's on EOL devices or former products, and I think it's just because they can't get the newest, greatest products. But we need to fix that. I'd love to get a place where we can do a better job of communicating of red teaming kind of together on some of these things, if that's of interest, so that we can fix the newest and greatest products, not show that something that was, brought out 20 years ago has a problem with today's issues.
You raised quite an interesting issue. For our companies, because we are, all of us work for quite huge organizations, it's hard for us to recruit young enthusiast researchers, because they see us as old dinosaurs, corporates that have no life in them, and nobody wants to work in such a place. And most researchers they are either in the academia or small startups, and we are left with burnt out researchers doing the work for us. And more collaboration, under NDA, okay? Because sometimes that kind of work that is being done should be really carefully examined before, it gets out of control. So more collaboration with the research community, but under the full understanding that this is a two-way kind of collaboration. We want to learn back, we want to give, we want to learn back, and we want to keep this under control until it can be rectified. Otherwise, we're kind of pulling the rug from under our feet.
Seeded devices becomes important there, like you were just kind of alluding to, like getting the new hardware into the right hands. That's extremely important, and that's actually massive call out to this conference. The hard pwn competition is super awesome with manufacturers coming in and providing that equipment for us to test. It also lets people who may not have the CVEs behind them to actually, take the credibility and talk to these manufacturers themselves, lets them get a first shot at it. So
Maybe I'll just add something a little there. Often the concern is for finding new vulnerabilities for things. And even you say new vulnerabilities in old products. A very fruitful game, maybe in terms of generating frustration, that I always used to play is the is it fixed game. It can be exceptionally fruitful. You go and you take some major things and you go, they said this was fixed. What does is this fixed mean? Is this fixed? This is especially hardware stuff is fantastic for this. Is it actually fixed? Did it stay fixed? And that's helpful to all of us as well.
I've had a bug ticket reopened 5 times over the course of 2 years. So, yeah.
Well, and then there's the issue of whether you mitigate something or whether you've actually fixed something and what the timelines are and what the customers need and want. I mean, yeah.
So speaking of hard pwn, what are some of the other things that you think industry could do to help with public security research?
Yeah, so seated devices is huge. Obviously, I'm comfortable with NDAs. I don't think anyone's really vouching against those here. But getting devices into the right hands, source code access where possible. I understand there's IP, but there's GPL components that a lot of manufacturers have that they don't get around to pushing source code for, or because they don't have necessarily the system to set up to detect those licenses. They don't get it out in public. So at minimum, having a contact that isn't just the legal @ address to go talk to about that. Because if you shoot compliance issue to legal @ it's going to take months to get the simplest of source code for a single library. Versus if it was, security research @ or security @ that was able to triage those and work with legal, we end up with a shorter timeline where they can go, oh, yeah, that license is GPL. We have to push that legally. That would be huge.
Any thoughts from your side?
I guess I'll even say, like, in support of that, as a vendor that again uses other companies' products, this is actually that's also a major point of frustration. We evaluate a lot of stuff internally, and even though we've got significant legal involvement and multi-party NDAs, all this kind of stuff, sometimes getting source code for things that is a major problem, and to the effect that like that doesn't stop us from doing our own research. We can decompile things. We can do whatever. So in that regard, it would be beneficial for companies to look at how they can remove some of those impediments and points of friction.
I'm going to give one other piece that I think is where we're going to diverge. Developer edition devices, unlock devices that have secure boot off that help us get that foot in the door so that we're not stabbing blindly into a black box. I understand the likelihood that we find something is a lot lower when we have that black box. But if we get that foot in the door, it is kind of a cat and mouse game, right? If you put the wall high enough, we're not going to, the lower people aren't going to be able to jump over it. They may have found something once they're inside, right? So developer edition devices, obviously NDA, not saying no NDA, but, getting those devices into the right people's hands, I think, is super crucial.
Then again, you're bypassing one of the most critical security mechanisms by allowing developer access. So for us, for example, we have development versions for internal use. We will never give those away under no circumstances, not even to our evaluation labs. Even evaluation labs, they come to us and they ask for decap devices, and we tell them, hey, you just been paid so much money, decap the devices yourself. See how that works for you. I don't want to have to do this. I mean, we get scored for evaluation by how hard it is to perform these operations. So no shortcuts. Hey.
Yeah, and I guess the question there of what is the consequence and what is the skin in the game for having access to one of those devices. If you're working for a company and you lose or misplace a developer device, that probably means you're losing your job. So that's the other side of it is that there's a protection of these things. But I understand how useful they are.
The one last thing I would say is that there's some government things to play into here. NSF was recently, their budget was slashed from $9 billion down to $3 billion. So we've fixed some of the researcher problem. But But industry needs to take a bigger part in funding these researchers and research and helping make these collaborations happen.
All right. Is there any hardware security issue that you're working on or studying that you think that the industry hasn't realized is going to be a huge problem?
Yeah, working on a CFP for that now entry, so I'll look out for that. But in short, supply chain attacks used to be targeted at large corporations. That was kind of the amount of money you had to put into it to fund that sort of operation was for a specific target. I'm now seeing, and I know a lot of us are now seeing things out in the wild in the consumer market, cheap devices going out. Point in case, and I'll allude to this more, but I know I can call out the one study that's already been done. I call it a study. Linus Tech Tips did a kind of a retrospective on Android TV devices being sold on eBay. And out of the 7 they purchased of the top 20 devices randomly straw polled, 6 of them were infected with at least a keylogger, with 3 or 4 of them doing full audio exfiltration of microphone from the remote. So fairly disturbing, right? And we're starting to see this stuff really recently, and I really think that supply chain issues to the consumer from the reseller market is going to become huge, which comes down to anti-tampering, comes down to validation coming out of the factory, what the resellers look like, and certified resellers. So,
and even from a design perspective, recovery mechanisms on the device. This is a concern for us in terms of our cloud hardware that we offer bare metal cloud. So this is giving customers really low access to the server. One of the main problems that we've had to solve is how do we return the hardware to a known good state? And this is definitely an area where a lot of consumer devices don't consider this at all. That notion of a remanufacturing or a secondary market just is often not a consideration.
Yeah, I also second this supply chain thing. That I think that as interesting as the research on vulnerability is right now, I think the major, danger lurking is supply chain attacks. Because as systems become more complicated and protected and secure, and we know that if we look at, we had the Samsung S4 example. I mean, our 2024, 2025 edition phones are, steps and bounds beyond that in terms of security. I mean, it's almost impossible to attack them as they are. I mean, if they are fresh from the manufacturer. However, adversaries and obviously states, they realize that, and they gearing up as we speak to attack supply chains and try to insert vulnerabilities in the hardware level, in new creative ways that we haven't known before. So it's one thing buying from an offshore retailer some box that you connect to your network, and I strongly advise against that. That's one thing, but buying critical infrastructure for billions of dollars, and that is obviously being manufactured offshore. There's no domestic manufacturing in any part of the Western world today, unfortunately. And there's very little control on what you're getting back, and not a lot of research on that. I mean, sometimes you have some vulnerabilities are found, like the EV panels or whatever that was, that like 2 weeks ago it was published that it came with a built-in cellular receiver and some controls that shouldn't have been there, would allow someone to remotely control the grid or the power going into the electric grid. Stuff like that, that catches a lot of attention. But it's easy to identify, it's easy to mitigate when counterfeit devices, silicon devices, make their way into the market, or even into the bill of material for high-profile systems like servers in this case. Well, that's going to be a huge headache, and there's very little. I don't know if the academic research is actually geared up to look into that, but that's a major problem that we see today.
And one of the other challenges is, even though there are guidelines right now, but it's more or less extremely difficult to communicate with the vendors, like identify who is the right person, and even as simple as an email address where I can at least, send the details over. Like, I personally have reached out to sales, customer support, right, to identify, and they're like, okay, this is the ticket, we'll call you back.
I had to hunt down a product security engineer from a company on LinkedIn, connect to him, and then reach out and go, hey, I've sent this email 3 times. Yeah. And then it got dealt with within about 2 weeks. So, getting to the right people. I know I heard a story that made me laugh that I'll probably let you tell, the janitorial one, the security email. But, definitely super fun.
I think
That's right. Just when we got one of those very salient Rowhammer papers, it was disclosed to our company to a janitor, and he didn't find it important, so we didn't find out about it for a very, very long time. So at least what I found is PSERT, incident response, product security incident response. That's what most larger companies have gone towards as their email for that.
So just one comment. Luckily, there is the European Union that is putting out a lot of regulations, and in part of those regulations, CRA requires companies to have contact points published for security awareness and stuff like that. So hopefully it will create the required change. At least you will have the right point of contact in any company's website.
I would ask you don't put that in a size 3 font at the bottom right of a page that's not hyperlinked anywhere else.
The EU is going to regulate Arial 12-point font for that. Don't worry.
All right. So how can the two communities better align on timelines or research or coordinate?
I have one idea for that.
Plan.
There's a university that we work with in Italy, and they put out fantastic cybersecurity engineers, Politecnico di Milano. But the thing that they've adopted, which we adore, is that if the thesis that the PhD is working on is particularly relevant or would cause some havoc, they'll hold it for up to 5 years before they publish it. So they'll graduate the student, but they'll hold the technical information. I've brought this up to a number of other places that have come to me begging for money because of the NSF problem, and I've offered this idea, and it's not very popular.
I mean, if that came with some funds attached for compensation for the delay, then that could probably be a motivating factor, I'm sure.
So wait, we started at 90 days, we moved to 300, now we're at 5 years? Uh-oh, something's slipping here. Let's hold on.
I mean, the bounty scales there, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Any last thoughts, Neer, on collaboration?
We need to have more of that. Actually, how to do that is, we go to the academia and but it's hard because most of the academic research is done in not a lot of places. I mean, you know that of the major academic and research facilities, and those that are actually good, they raise the bar very high for collaboration. I mean, that's going to be expensive, and sometimes we cannot even justify that internally.
I would say collaboration-wise, you mentioned that you really would like to see us try to help remediate these issues. That kind of harkens back to the source code share where applicable and where possible. Not like obviously for IP stuff, but talking about the possible to open source the GPL stuff. It kind of comes back to us understanding what that looks like and how we can help you fix it. That becomes really critical at that point.
All right. I think that was a good discussion. So before winding up, I think 90-day timeline won't work. We need product security teams need recommendations in addition to just giving them the vulnerabilities. It would be good if researchers get access to source code. Supply chain security issues are becoming more common, so be careful when you're ordering stuff from Amazon. I think with that, we have a couple of minutes. We can open for any questions.
I have a question. So you guys mentioned the trade-off between efficiency and security, and I understand it. I hear you, but it seems like the cost of fixing security or the consequences of not fixing it are low. So I think security, you shake like hands. We had Boeing planes fall out of the sky and nobody went to jail. Okay, so the cost and these are serious stuff. So I think framing the problem that way, security is always going to lose. So my question to you in some sense is, what would you like to, how can we help you win that argument? Is it because otherwise the way things are, the consequences of ignoring security, the cost of ignoring a security, issue is low. If you, as an executive, you look at the problem and go I don't know, maybe I'll pay a fine at some point in the future. Let's move on. In the meantime, we're going to make all this money from selling our products. So I just don't know. I feel like we're not making progress on that trade-off.
Let me get that one. Since you obviously referring Rowhammer as one. No. You had that on your shirt.
I just happen to know about Rowhammer.
Yeah. Okay. So, some of the security issues have absolutely nothing to do with the actual products we make, unless we claim some security. Okay. So, in case we claim security in a product, well, we should account for that. So, if I'm selling you a secure flash, you find vulnerability, it's my problem. If I'm selling you a commodity product and you find a problem, I don't know if it's my problem. It's a mutual problem for both of us, so both of us should sit down and think about what we can do about that. So in that case, I think the responsibility divides between a few parties. So that's a distinction I like to make. So if, for example, Oracle claims that they have a secure server farm and that they can sandbox something, and then you find a way using Rowhammer, for example, to break that. So it's going to be something that you want to take care of Oracle and probably their processor vendors. So it's becoming, and I don't think someone wants to just, ignore that. It's obviously a major problem that should be taken care of, but it's not just the DRAM maker problem or Oracle's problem, or it's a problem that's common to a lot of parties.
Can I add one? I'm going to hate myself for saying this. I really am. But working for an insurance company, especially, at its core, and also kind of talking through it, risk aversion and risk appetite, right? So obviously loss of human life, unacceptable on that front. In the example you brought up, I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But when we're talking about loss of revenue or anything like that, it all comes down to a risk calculation and a risk factor. Does it make sense for our company to put in, I don't know, for Rowhammer, for others, months, years to get these things remediated properly the way it needs to be? And it's a tough question. But from the researcher side, I absolutely feel you.
I think some of the problem there is also how people understand those large impact risks. It's common to refer to things as far as stuff that doesn't get fixed, security vulnerabilities, as technical debt. But debt, we know, in that case, we know with debt we know what we owe, and we know what that financial trade-off is for what it costs to service that debt and whatnot. And I think that this is this is not the right way to look at things, because people need to understand that you might not even know the full extent of the impact when it's very serious impacts. You're often trading a very small incremental piece of revenue for not doing something, for not investing in something now. For that next quarter result, for something that the risk is actually, you may not even be able to qualify or in any way the actual impact, and the impact may be gigantic, like they were saying, where it turns into cloud killing things, and being able, actually, I think that maybe there's a particular point, being able to, if it is something that is potentially a cloud killing thing, being able to articulate how that happens and very clearly, so that you can say that the downside risk to this isn't just the cost to fix it and whatnot. No, the downside risk to this is serious ruin. Yeah.
We can't allocate budget for this quarter because rate at which number go up did not go up enough.
Yeah, that too.
I think we've exceeded the time, but we can take one last question. I saw some hand somewhere over there. Last question.
First. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you it was a very informative talk. I just wanted to talk on collaboration and fostering academic research. So I'm speaking from my academic point of view because I'm also pursuing my PhD, and I'm going to talk about one of the challenges, right, in trying to fostering good research, right. And I feel like there's a sort of, so speaking from my personal experience, I feel like there's a shortage of industry experts who are doing so well, who would want to, foster research, right? Why I'm saying this is like a lot of bright academics who are maybe in security, we're very passionate about doing research, but sort of having a sort of mentorship to extend to the academic community, right? And the sort of young folks who want to do research, but mentorship is actually a very big problem when it comes to research. Some very solid engineers who are doing great stuff. Like they understand the state of the art, the current state of the art. Maybe it's like, be it hardware security or maybe let's say fuzzing, use that as an example, right? And they're not able to extend to, there's no interest. Like, I guess the industry experts needs to extend more to academic communities so that students who are maybe like PhD students, can kind of do that collaboration. It makes more sense, and there's a lot of strength in that research so that it makes more impact. Security's hard to get into in some ways, right? It's very tight-lipped. People keep things to themselves, as that's kind of security by nature. The research field's especially hard to get into, and if you look back about a decade ago, I know I've talked to Ryan, the guy who did Ryan Grotchuk, who did the talk on the JTAG on the S4 back then. I mean, it was all backdoor, it was all hidden, it was all kind of underground, and you talk to the manufacturer, but there were no formal VRP programs. We're working towards VRP programs being more formal and getting those lines drawn, but at the same time, it's still kind of a little bit quiet, right? This conference and these awesome conferences sort of foster that connection and that connectivity, but there aren't a lot of good places outside of places like this, in my opinion, to really meet those people and get to know those people. Because otherwise, it's, do I trust this random guy on the internet? And I'm going to let you know they don't.
But I would say that there are efforts. Like I have talks lined up this fall at 3 different universities. We're trying to collaborate more. I'm trying to set up my guys as mentors to, some of the people, at least the local universities, so they're not traveling. Because otherwise I'm going to be hiring old people that only know old problems. I want the new ideas and differences. So you're totally right.
Mentorship itself in cybersecurity is extremely difficult too. I really appreciate the industry saying that. That's really good to hear. But even non-industry side mentorship is super difficult to find. And as you'll find, a talk I've joked about a few times is a Meta talk here. Not Meta, the company, but Meta, the term. They've co-opted that, haven't they? But the term, talking about kind of the lineage of the security researchers that are here, because from me, you can draw a direct line to others here, and you can draw a direct line up to others that are here, and so on and so forth. I learned everything I know from him. Oh, I learned from him. Wait, what? And it's kind of those connections that become really integral. So connecting with people and really not being afraid to walk up and talk to people is kind of, I'd say, the biggest thing I can recommend.
Yeah, I mean, people are all ultimately responsible for their own learning. You can't shove information into somebody's mind, and you have to seek out those people that you think that you can learn from, that you want to learn from, and do see what you can to engage with them. So I mean, sometimes that's, can you go to a conference and have a conversation, or can you do some work and try and get it in front of them? There's all different sort of strategies.
All right. With that, we end the panel session. Thank you so much for being here.